Bitcoin up around 10% in the last 5 days or so, looking good on the daily chart, but some concerns as well that I want to talk about in this video. ADA on the daily chart, very similar thing happening. So there's definitely some bullish indicators that I want to look at in terms of Bitcoin and Cardano, but there are some concerns that I also want to look at. And I just want to break down all of the data so that as we go into this new week, we can kind of prepare and watch the charts for certain confirmation. So hit the subscribe, hit the like. Let's jump into the video. It's going to be just a nice technical analysis video. Bitcoin and then ADA. Let's start with Bitcoin. Before we talk about Bitcoin on the daily and talk about short-term price action, what I'm watching right now as we begin the week, I want to start on the weekly because I mentioned some concerns. There's two things on the weekly, and there's one bullish thing as well that I'm going to show you, but two things first that pose a very interesting perspective on Bitcoin charts. Let me point these things out to you. Number one, we are at Bitcoin halving, right? The thing I noticed is over the years, and I've been doing YouTube videos over 6 years covering these charts. The thing I just noticed though, as we've seen so much consistency in these cycles, we're starting to see indicators that are saying, you know what, this cycle is different now. The move and flow of Bitcoin is officially different. Right? We've already talked about the fact that Bitcoin halving happened and Bitcoin has broken all-time high, right? Before Bitcoin halving, also breaking these Fibonacci bull market doors. That was different. This has never happened. But besides that, if we just open up now some momentum oscillators, right? If we look at the MACD momentum oscillator on Bitcoin, this is a little bit of a concern just in general. Put cycles aside. We have the MACD line kind of just trending down towards this red signal line, right? And it gives vibes of all the way back here, right? And this is like the last bull market high. And this was very far after the Bitcoin halving. So we're getting a very similar MACD indicator that we've got at the last bull market kind of high area. And it's happening right now at the Bitcoin halving. That's one thing. And I just want to mention, this does not mean that this is the end of a bull market. Or, I mean, this could very well be the beginning of a bull market and the MACD is looking like this, but this plays right into the point that these charts are changing. These charts are absolutely maturing. And so what I'll be watching now is you can see the MACD was actually trending down towards that signal line back here in January, and then it popped right back to the upside. Maybe we're getting a similar consolidation, right? We'll continue to track the MACD, but the other thing I wanted to mention was if we close the MACD, and we just look at a very simple RSI, check this out. Last halving, here's last halving back here, 2020. RSI all the way down here, around 50 to 60. The halving of 2016, RSI right here, right? Below overbought. RSI in 2012 halving, right here. So all of these halvings, Bitcoin has been below overbought area. Look how overheated Bitcoin has been months going into the Bitcoin halving. And even now as the Bitcoin halving has happened, it's just above the overbought line, but it's still above the overbought line. Again, another indicator that these cycles are changing. And I want to say right now, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If cycles are changing, that means time frames of bull markets and how long they might last in the timeline there could be longer. It could be better. We could be entering a more healthy market, right? So on the zoomed out, I don't think that's bad. Now, if I want to talk about the bullish perspective of these charts, if we look at Bitcoin right now and what it's doing on the weekly chart, check it out. It's just dipped. It's just consolidated. And in any bullish environment, this is such a good thing. And you can just see it all the way back here from, the beginning of March, basically, all of this consolidation. You see those red candles on the weekly. Oftentimes we'll zoom out and we'll look at, what are bull markets made of? And we see, right, back here, there's a couple of big red candles at the beginning of that last bull market leading into the bull market, huge consolidation to the 20-week. In the middle of the bull market, there's some big consolidation right there. And then you go to the cycle before, even more pronounced, just huge dip after huge dip, right? Look at these dips. These are massive dips. This dip alone right here back to the 20-week moving average, 39, 40% dip. So that's what bull markets are made of. But notice those dips that we're really talking about and watching in previous cycles happened after the Bitcoin halving. So we're getting just a very similar type of consolidation, and we're only at Bitcoin halving. To me, this says the cycles are changing, but it also says, you know what? This bull cycle could be like something that's never been experienced in crypto. It could be longer lasting. It could be just more consistent in the rhythm and flow of it. And I think along the way, if that would be the case, these dips are very important, especially as we're so early. The Bitcoin halving just happened the other day. Let's talk about short-term price action. This is short-term price action. So almost perfect technical move for Bitcoin. And I'm talking about, if we zoom out on the daily, I'm talking about this rising wedge all the way back here that we've been tracking, broke out of this upper trend line. That's the upper trend line right there. Broke out in February, did not hit the target yet of $85,000. Got kind of halfway there and we pulled back. Look at the pullback though, right back to this trend line, the upper trend line. Just a perfect throwback for Bitcoin from a technical perspective. This happens so often, whether it's a short-term pattern or a long-term pattern. So check this out. If you're interested in the technical analysis of it, and this is why I like it, if you look at the upper trend line, right, of that huge wedge being broken, and then the throwback, we say throwbacks happen, right? To the downside, we had a very similar thing. We had a short-term formation, a symmetrical triangle, and we had a downside move for Bitcoin. So as Bitcoin's actually revisiting that huge macro trend line and getting that massive macro throwback, it saw support there, and then it bounced to the upside, and that's where we are right now. And what are we getting? We're getting the same exact thing, but kind of inverse. We're getting a pullback to the lower trend line of this small pattern. So you see how these patterns, they get these throwbacks and these pullbacks, and Bitcoin kind of revisits a very key trend line. This is what's happening right now. So in a similar sense, where we saw Bitcoin break in February to the upside and then throw back to the lower trend line right there, getting support. Now we're getting a pullback to the short term. Well, will we get resistance? That's the short term question. That's the short term. We can call it a concern, but we can also call it an area of bullish confirmation, because there's a lot of confluent resistance here. And if Bitcoin can break above this area, we could really see Bitcoin enter kind of a new trend and start talking about, once again, visiting all-time highs, breaking all-time highs, getting back into price discovery. And so this is what it looks like. Bitcoin right now, just at the exact area of this lower trend line of the symmetrical triangle. So we fell out of the symmetrical triangle. We're pulled back to the lower trend line. It is right around 66,400. The 20-day moving average is perfectly confluent with that area. And just above it is not only the 50-day moving average around 67,500, that's the next area to the upside. If Bitcoin makes a move, right, what happens there? $67,500. It's not far away. It's like $1,000 away. Is there resistance? Because the other thing here, it's the apex of the symmetrical triangle, right? What I would love to see, and this can be the hopium for bulls. If you're a bull out there, I would just love to see the fake breakout to the downside, the pullback to the apex, and we'd be getting a broken symmetrical triangle to the downside. That means a fake breakout to the downside, and it's broken and it's busted, and Bitcoin actually breaks to the upside, right? And then we see Bitcoin break to the upside and kind of hit like an $85,000 target to the upside. And that $85,000 range is kind of a target from this general area down here of the symmetrical triangle. Previous target, if we were going to get a breakout back here, was around $88,000 to $90,000, $89,000 or so. But I'd be measuring kind of a breakout area from this apex area of around 85. And what is that? That's the breakout target for that massive upper trend line breakout in February, rising wedge that we had there right there. So there's a story to be told for Bitcoin breaking to the upside. A lot of it has to do with, though, is Bitcoin really ready for that, right? Because again, going back to the weekly, if these cycles are changing and Bitcoin needs to cool down even more at this stage, Bitcoin having just happened, if it needs to pace itself, I guess you could say, maybe there's more consolidation needed. Maybe that MACD that we looked at needs to cool down a little bit, right? Here's the MACD. Maybe it needs to cool down more. Maybe we need to fall below 0 on the histogram and let it cool down before really entering the next phase of the bull run. And this might require patience, but all this story playing out in the short term right here, if there's resistance at this lower trend line, what I'd be watching for is continued consolidation, and we'd be continually tracking the upper trend line support area of that massive rising wedge. So maybe we'll have a new piece of consolidation in this general area as Bitcoin continues to cool down. But what we want to see is Bitcoin break to the upside, break through the apex, the entire apex. There's moving averages, everything really up to around $69,000, $69,000 to $70,000. That's what we want to see for the bulls to really flip this thing around, start getting that bullish momentum. Going over to ADA, it's just a very similar story happening with ADA across the board, especially on the daily chart. So let's start on the weekly, and then we'll talk about the short-term price action of ADA and what to anticipate, truly. And I'm talking about even to the downside, but also to the upside. If we go to the weekly chart, here's the deal. The one thing that I continually see in terms of ADA, and by the way, I want to actually look at a different momentum oscillator that I haven't looked at too much lately on ADA. But the one thing that I continually see when it comes to ADA is the very fact that, you know what? When you zoom out on the ADA chart and you look at Bitcoin halving back here as kind of a general guide for where we are this cycle, ADA it very much does. It just looks completely on track, and it looks very normal. And when we start looking at structure, I was discussing this piece right here, as many of you know, and most recently started kind of also discussing this consolidation back here, trying to just find a very similar area of structure that we have on this chart. If we're going to compare this one, we know what happened. ADA broke down. It didn't break up, right? But for me, as I look at that, that doesn't mean it's game over in terms of the cycles repeating for ADA and ADA becoming bullish. For me, it just means, you know what, crypto is in a different stage right now of its cycle. And so if we see different structure setups on Cardano, it just makes sense, right? But not only that, when I am looking at this, as ADA is exiting the bear, getting overextended, it pulled into between the 20 and the 50. And that's a story that's playing out now as well. We exited the bear, and it's pulled into between the 20 and the 50 moving averages. So right now, that's an area of interest that I'm watching. I want to make a note, though. The 50 moving average on the weekly is right around 41 cents. And if we go to the daily chart, there's a very clear target below that, right? It's a support area that I'm going to monitor. I would love to see ADA consolidate between these two areas, the 50, the 20, just like last cycle. I would really love to see that happen this cycle. But if it breaks to the downside, it breaks to the downside, and it is what it is. And we have to start discussing, you know what? We had this breakout out of the descending triangle back in November, and we're getting what? We're getting a throwback to the actual pattern itself. And it all starts really with this rising wedge that ADA has been in for weeks. And it just is the case that ADA, instead of breaking to the upside and hitting a bullish target above $1, right, going into halving, we're falling to the downside. Now, that's the bearish scenario. I had to get it out of the way. If we start looking at some other things, though, check this out. On the weekly chart, we have ADA has cooled down, just like Bitcoin. We just looked at Bitcoin. Look at the RSI. This is a stock RSI. So I talk about the RSI right here a lot. It's a slower moving momentum oscillator. It's one of my favorite indicators. But the stock RSI is also a momentum oscillator. It's just quicker moving, right? It just gives a glance of momentum as it moves quicker on these charts. And on the weekly chart, I want to point something out. We are in oversold. It looks like ADA is trying to bottom out and oversold. And what I want to point out is if you look at the momentum oscillator on ADA, even this one was barely oversold, just above oversold. That move, ADA saw a move to the upside, right? And then if we go to the last time ADA was kind of as oversold as it's been in this previous move, where we are right now, this was the bottoming out area for ADA. And it was looking so bad. It was looking so ugly for ADA. At the time, I'm sure everybody was just saying ADA is going to zero. And then that was the bottoming out formation of ADA. And ADA pulled into the 20-week, the 50-week, and actually made its way up to the 200-week moving average. A massive move for ADA at this moment. even if you look at right here, ADA in oversold area, it wasn't the end of the bear market really for ADA, but it was ADA pulling back into the 20 and testing moving average areas. You go all the way back here, check it out. ADA, as it was consolidating between the 20 and the 50, this very similar technical move ADA is getting right now, bottoming out on the RSI, the stock RSI, quicker moving momentum oscillator. It took weeks of higher highs and higher lows, really, but ADA exited that oversold environment and it absolutely exploded. This is a bullish case for ADA. If crypto especially is going to continue making a move to the upside right now, ADA charts are very primed on the macro to see the support between the 20 and the 50-week moving averages and just absolutely explode to the upside. There's going to be a lot of hurdles along the way, right? First off is the 20-week moving average around 57 cents. We have the lower trend line. So we're getting the pullback scenario. We have the lower trend line that's in play for ADA. And we have to break back into that. We have to break the 200. But if these things break up to around 72 cents, ADA is going to be in a whole new environment of momentum where we could really see ADA start making its way finally to above $1. And at this stage of the cycle, it's becoming more, I would say, realistic for that dollar ADA. I mentioned months ago, I think it was February. I didn't think ADA would be above $1 or at $1 before Bitcoin halving. And that's just because that would be normal. And it hasn't been above $1 before Bitcoin halving. But now Bitcoin halving has happened. I think the journey to $1 for ADA is in play now. And it could begin the journey if we're looking at these weekly charts. It could be happening right now. But here's what the resistance looks like on the daily charts. So first thing I notice is just the lower highs, right? Swing high, lower high, all at this 20-day moving average too. And where's ADA right now? 20-day moving average. So I have to be careful. We're looking at all of these bullish indicators. One thing I want to make a note of, if we look at this swing low here, and then ADA's moving into the 20-day moving average. This was the first week of April, right? And then if we go to the weekly chart and we open up that RSI and we say, okay, let's look at basically, it was right around here, right? ADA was still kind of just bottoming out on the RSI, that's the quicker moving momentum oscillator that we were just looking at. Now, ADA is on that weekly chart. It's really trying to form this momentum to the upside as this move is happening. And the same is true here. If we go back here, this was March. Guess what? ADA is like falling on that weekly chart, right? In March. And it's falling on the RSI in March. Here's the RSI falling down. We're not there right now. It's actually trying to pivot back to the upside. So there's a case where this move that's happening right now, and this is what I'll be watching this week, truly. Prepared for resistance. I want to say that right off the bat. This could be a lower high right now forming, right? I don't get bullish right now on the short term when I see moves like this. This exit here, I don't get bullish because the 20-day is clearly right there. We could just see rejection and continue down. Now, and I'm talking about down into the 30s. Now, what I will be watching for this week is, can ADA start closing daily candles above the 20-day moving average around 52.5 cents? And then if it does, we have two things that we just talked about on the weekly, I believe, the lower trend line of that rising wedge, and then the 50-day moving average is here on the daily around 62 cents. So this range right here is the range. If ADA can break through these areas, and I'm not saying it has to happen this week, there could be some, a break above the 20, fall back below, and then let the 50 pull in, and then it could take a little bit of time. But if ADA can make this move back into that rising wedge, that will be, I think, the first sign of bullish confirmation for ADA that we might be getting a similar move to what we had back here. Now, just as a reminder, back here before ADA really did explode, what did it do? It took weeks kind of for ADA to just see higher highs, higher lows below that 20-week moving average. 20-week moving average was acting kind of as resistance. So it will be interesting to see how ADA reacts or interacts with the 20-week moving average right now around 57 cents. So that's my ADA analysis as we start this week. I'm trying to just put it all out there. The bullish, the bearish, everything that we can prepare for. And the same thing for Bitcoin. This is what I'll be watching for this week. We'll continue to analyze crypto markets anything that's going on. We'll watch the charts. We'll wait for confirmations, bullish or bearish. Hit the subscribe, hit the like. I appreciate you cruising through. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.